So welcome, Geraldine, to the Inspirational Leaders series of online videos. Thank you very much indeed for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Geraldine, you've worked with many leaders and many teams in your life, and before we go into exploring some of those, I'd really like to explore, what did you, when you were growing up, when you were a young girl, what did you want to be?
Well, when I was probably about 7 to 10, I wanted to be a ballerina. Margot Fontaine era. And sadly, I was rather big and chunky to be a ballerina. So despite the fact I had lessons and was quite captivated by it all, I was never physically going to be able to be a ballerina. I thought about being a choreographer, but that progressed, I think, as I got into secondary school, and I was more into science than arts. I always wanted to be a scientist who researched a cure for cancer. I wanted to do something for the world that would make a difference. That was going to be it initially, till I realised that actually I didn't like working in laboratories that much. I wasn't that good at chemistry either, but there was something in there about wanting to make a difference, and in some way do something different was always there.
So what talents and strengths did you sort of tap into and bring to your career once you'd sort of gone, you studied at university, I don't know what particularly you studied, but what strengths did you pull on from those initial aspirations?
Well, I was lucky enough to do applied psychology at university. Because I moved from the science thing, I wanted to be a doctor. And when I was doing A-levels, medical schools wanted far higher grades from women than men, which I thought was grossly unfair. So I went off that idea. Then I wanted to be a psychiatrist, but realised you had to be a doctor first. So that's how I got to psychology. So I ended up going to an applied psychology department and never looked back from studying the application of psychology to things at work particularly. And so I think I brought to my career a level of objectivity and wanting to know the facts, which coming into human resources I think has really stood me in good stead, that I didn't get carried away with emotion or opinion about things. I wanted a real balance between the facts and the emotion, and I wanted to get to the source of. So I always believe, particularly in human resources, that presenting problem is never the real problem. And I think my scientific training has made me be curious. So I think I carried that with me.
So you've been in a number of different sectors in your career as well. Would you like to share, not necessarily the names of the organisation, what sort of sectors did you work in? Did you grow your expertise before we start talking specifically about it?
Well, it's interesting because I had a short spell for a year in the civil service where they did have a very esteemed group of applied psychologists. I did a placement year from university there. And then after university, I joined London Transport because I wanted to be in London where all the action was in those days. And they had a very good graduate programme in HR. But it really wasn't the right type of environment for me. I did stick it out for about three and a half years. And then I was fortunate enough to get selected by British American Tobacco, where I had a wonderful 10 years, only marred by the fact that they made, in those days, so much money. There was no impetus for them to do anything different in HR, so I was getting kind of bored and a bit stale. And then 25 years ago, I joined Standard Chartered Bank, but it was such a different organisation. It doesn't feel like I've been in one organisation for 25 years. It feels like I've grown and changed and evolved as the organisation has.
Yeah. So you work globally, obviously, and you've lived globally as well, haven't you?
I did move to Singapore for 8 years, and that was a base for doing a regional job and then a global job, so masses of travel around all of that. And when I was in BAT and I was desperate to see the world, I put my hand up to do training programs in Africa and trooped around Africa for about a year, which was amazing. So I've always had this little bit of I'd like my job to enable me to explore and see the world. So I've been very lucky in that respect.
So you've worked with many leaders, many senior leaders and senior leadership teams, and I'm curious about your philosophy and how you approach working with them. Could you share some of that with us?
Well, I think that actually, I think it's I've probably got to a stage after so many years of thinking this work's quite simple. To me, it's very simple. There's first of all something about helping a leader to become more self-aware. So help them understand what do they naturally do, what habits have they got that help people, and what habits have they got that don't help people. And in my experience, leaders often don't have the opportunity to have a mirror held up to them very often. So I think that process of self-awareness and understanding then of course puts them at choice, that says, well, which habits do you feel motivated to maybe change or do differently, in which case I think again leaders can learn and grow and change if they're motivated to. And then I think when it comes to working with teams, I have adopted basically the Lencioni work, which says that teams need to go through 4 stages of development, starting with building trust with each other as people in the world. People need to get to know each other and understand how different they are and the benefits that come from those differences. And then they need to understand how to be constructive and challenge each other and have those difficult conversations productively. And then they need to align around common goals and outcomes, so they're all pulling or pushing in the same direction. And then they need to learn how to hold each other accountable. And if they can master all of that, then all the research shows that they're going to produce fabulous results. So the work I do with teams is really built on that model, but probably with two big differences. One is that I believe in helping people to learn and grow, it's much better to help them play to their strengths. So I spend much more time helping people understand what they're really good at, because that's what's going to make world-class performance. And secondly, that despite all the technology in the world, the thing that really matters is how you communicate and talk with people, whether it's your team, whether it's your peers, whether it's your stakeholders. And it's not about writing emails, it's about talking. So the quality of the dialogues that you have and the way that you set those dialogues up and the way that you carry yourself through those dialogues is the key enabler of influencing as a leader that I help people to focus on.
Fantastic. Wonderful. So as you're facilitating leaders, I'm just curious around, do you find that you're giving them sort of consistent, the same sort of feedback? Are there themes that run through some of the feedback and the work that you do with them?
Yes, that's a very interesting question, because I find myself often thinking, I'm sure I've been here before. And I think there are some themes. I mean, I haven't thought them through particularly clearly, but I was just thinking of a conversation I had with somebody this morning, and I thought, gosh, I've had this conversation so many times. And I think the first one is just helping leaders understand what balcony they're on. So are they spending too much time right down on the dance floor in the weeds at a level of detail that they should not be getting themselves involved in, but maybe that's where they feel comfortable. So I think it's kind of helping them see there's another balcony. If you stepped up on another balcony, what would you be doing that you're not doing now? And typically it's looking across and seeing a bigger picture on top of their team, or on top of their function, or on top of their region, or even on top of the organisation as a whole, and looking externally more. It's kind of which balcony are you playing in? I think the second one is to help leaders think that actually, although time is finite, there is always enough time. Most leaders tell me, I haven't got enough time to do everything I need to do. I'm really stressed. There's too much to do. And usually the answer is, you're creating too much for you to do. And what you need to look at is your delegation strategy and how you're effectively using people around you, and how you're prioritising and being more flexible about timelines on things, with a sense of, how long is your company going to be in existence for? How long are you going to be in this job for? And most people, in my experience, just managing kind of 3-month timelines. And the reality is some of the stuff they need to do is going to take 3 years. So there's a whole timing and pacing element to things. I usually find myself slowing people down and just helping them think about the reality of the timelines that they're setting themselves.
I want to ask you, you've a couple of things. One, I'd like you to talk about one of your biggest leadership challenges, and how you approach that. What strengths, what skills, what values did you draw upon to overcome or move it beyond that challenge, if you could think of that. And the second one is around, you have children who are millennials, who are born in the years where they're now young adults, and they are creating the future. They will be, and they are starting now to create the future. They will be our future leaders. And from what you've learnt, how do you see leadership in terms of millennials? If you've got a vision of the future, what are the learnings? What do you think may start coming about that's different from your experience of leaders?
Okay, two big questions.
I know they are.
What was the first one? Back to the first one.
The first one.
My own
absolutely. Your biggest leadership challenge, or just one leadership challenge you had that you thought that you would like to share, that you got over, you managed to get over that in a particular way that drew on some qualities that you had, that you were.
Lots of leadership challenges. Let me think of one. I think we all probably experience working for somebody that we don't get on particularly well with, or we don't particularly respect, maybe. And I've worked for so many people. Of course, that's happened. And I think that I've managed very well to use that as a learning opportunity. First of all, I've thought to myself, well, when I get to a position of influence that you're in, which I hope I do one day, I'll be very clear what not to do. So it's a big learning opportunity. But secondly, I think it really helped me to think about how do I challenge with, as my current CEO has just told me recently, challenge with grace and charm, to the point where you don't really know you've been challenged till after the event, when you think, hang on a minute. Sometimes, apparently, I say it very bluntly, but most of the time I can package it with charm and grace so that it lands well. And I think I learned to do that because I had to be very tenacious about how to communicate in such a way that it landed well with the other person. And I think that really did teach me to not think about how I want to do it, but think about the other person's whole persona and frame of reference. And if I want to influence them, then I've got to step in their shoes and think about what is it that they will hear if I communicate it for their ears and not for my ears. And that was a huge learning, and I think that's placed me in really good stead later on in my career, when I found myself increasingly working and trying to influence much more senior people.
Excellent, thank you. And the second question was around millennials and leadership.
Oh yes, yeah.
Your thoughts around the future, and you have kids who are millennials as well, and they're going to be leaders of the future. What's your vision of that? What thoughts do you have around that? I
think the fact that I've got two boys from a different generation is incredibly helpful for me. I mean, I was brought up with a generation. My parents came out of the Second World War and had this sense of, a job demands total dedication, loyalty, and hard work will pay off. There was that work ethic that we had, and you don't really question your elders particularly, but you sort of get on and just work really hard. And my boys have seen me do that up to a point. And I remember very early on, they used to say to me, I really want to know what you do, Mum, because I don't want to do that. And I used to think, that's sad. Why not? Because you're very tired, you get very stressed, you never have any spare time. It's not the life I want. And I used to think, well, you guys just have no clue what it's going to be like in this world. But actually, true to themselves and with their friends, I think I found that they believe they have incredible choice, because the world is one market, and that they are looking to be to have learning and meaning in what they do. Whereas we would never challenge when I was young. If you were given a grotty job to do, you just got on with it and were grateful for doing the filing. Although I did nearly get fired once for complaining when I was a graduate, now I think about it. but they want to do work which they find interesting, and their level for learning is higher, their level for variety is higher, and their ability or willingness to make choices more quickly about what they're going to do and when they're going to do it is, I think, much more available to them than was available to us. So it's a very, very, very different mindset. And I think it's refreshing, and I think it's very energizing, actually, to have those sorts of people around me at work as well. But it's totally different, totally different.
Talking about, moving forward onto your future, I know that you're working currently, and you will be working with the Forward Institute, and that's going to have an impact on millennials and leadership. Could you say a little bit more about what your role is there, and what's happening in that context?
Yes, well, the Forward Institute was set up about 18 months ago, and it came out of the Saltz Review. So Anthony Saltz is actually chairing the Forward Institute, and BCG sponsored it initially to create a program to take middle senior managers who are seen to be high performing and high potential onto a modular leadership development program that does something different from any other program. So the purpose of it is to instill an ethos of socially responsible leadership, so that these individuals can think about the impact that their organisation's having in society, and also the role that organisations need to play increasingly in the world and in the societies and communities in which they work. So we're trying to build a broader model of leadership, and about 20 companies are participating, which means they each put 2 or 3 leaders into the programme. So there's a little bit of critical mass. The sponsor is the CEO of the organisation, which is great, and the HRD is also involved. And we're just going through the end of the first year, and we're going into our second year with lots of learnings. But I think the delegates, all of them, have asked the sponsoring companies to become repeat sponsors. And I think probably the most inspiring thing for me from it has been the recognition that they've made friends for life, particularly in their smaller discussion or project groups, and that it's that connectivity outside of their organisations as they get more influence and power that can make a difference in society. And I think they're really excited about the prospect of doing that in the future.
Great, thank you. I attended earlier this year the first Global Women's Forum in Dubai. It's a very large conference. There were 2,000 local Emirati ladies attending this at all levels. There were a few people who are expats like myself who are also there as well. And it was opened by Queen Rania of Jordan. She opened the conference, and there was Christian Lagarde and many other
Wow.
presidents of Chile and all this, females there as well. And Prince Rania, there's a quote here, and I was just wondering what your thought was about this, and what meaning it might have for you. She said, "When a woman succeeds, she reaches out to those around her and pulls them up with her. That is why, if you empower a woman, you empower a whole society." And I was wondering, what meaning does that have for you? How do you connect with that, or not, as the case may be?
I have a different experience, actually, sadly. I have found that I've met 2 groups of women. I meet one group of women who say, well, I got here through the difficult times, nobody helped me, so kind of get on with it. Literally. I mean, I haven't seen them give that much back. And then there's another group of women who probably haven't even got to where they're going to get to yet, but they're giving back much earlier than traditionally perhaps would have been expected. And perhaps if I could mention the Pink Dynasty,
absolutely.
Which is a wonderful project that was started in Standard Chartered Bank, and I was invited to become the patron, but obviously as I'm leaving the bank, that role will change a little bit now. But this was through women who were still only in their mid-30s or maybe coming up to 40, who wanted to start giving back much earlier, and they identified disadvantaged women who'd got to university or college but were limiting their aspirations, particularly never thought they could, although they're studying law, never thought they'd get to law school or get to a prestigious law firm or get into a big consultancy. So we're trying to give these women work experience and skills training, do something really practical. So, and the whole philosophy is to encourage more women to give back earlier. So I think the quote might be true, but it doesn't seem to be universally applicable. I think more women have to give more back, and sooner is my view.
And I think with Queen Rania, it was an aspirational quote as well, I think, that she hoped would come out of the conference.
I have that aspirationally, yes.
But actually, when I look at you and how you have pulled people up with you in your career, that's how I was hoping you might relate to that, because you have a record of pulling people up around you. You grow people very quickly and rapidly.
Yes, not just women though.
No, I know.
Not just women.
No, that's true. That's true.
But yes, I mean, there's no greater joy in my experience. There's no greater joy. Two things, I think. One is seeing somebody who's a raw talent that you're able to grow and nurture and see them flourish away from you. They step away from your patronage in a way, and they're super successful somewhere else. Or people who've worked for me, and the usual quote is, "You're the toughest boss that I've had, but I've learned so much from you, and I'm a better person for the experience, and I've been able to acquire skills and knowledge and go on and do bigger and better things." I mean, that's a joy for me anyway.
Any final thoughts you'd like to share on this particular programme that you have? You mentioned something earlier about choices and things like that.
Well, there's a couple of things. I think leaders are made, they're not born. I think human beings have a remarkable capacity for adaptability, and I believe that if somebody is motivated to adapt and learn and grow, then they can become a better leader. I firmly believe that, a much better leader. And leadership of itself is evolving. The type of things you need to do to be an effective leader now and for the future is very different from what it looked like a decade ago, which is another conversation, clearly. So I always say to people that you're always at choice. You always have the choice about how you react, about what you say, about what you do. Never forget that you have a choice, and therefore that presents you with possibilities for change. I think that's probably, and the other is that everybody's different. So you shouldn't try to be somebody else. You should be your best self. I think if everyone is able to be their best self, then they'll find joy in what they do, and they'll be really good at what they do if they're truly their best self.
Thank you very much indeed, Geraldine.
You're welcome.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.